Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we dive deep into regional headlines and speak with leading policymakers and business leaders. I am Katie Jensen. Massive change is underway in the Middle East, with the once dominant presence of the United States gradually diminishing. As the US reassesses its role in the region, the influence of other global players like China and Russia is on the rise after the Chinese brokered a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, alongside President Assad's welcome back into the Arab fold, both leading to backlash from Western governments. On this episode of Frankly Speaking, we hear from renowned Saudi geopolitical analyst Salman Al-Ansari to ask how the kingdom has become the political center of the new Middle East, with multiple diplomatic missions in recent weeks, whether real progress has been achieved with Tehran after the historic deal on March 10, and if a pariah state like Syria can be rehabilitated internationally without the blessing of the West. Mr. Al-Ansari, thank you for joining us on Frankly Speaking. Now, in less than 2 weeks, we have seen Saudi Arabia sign an agreement with ASEAN, a cooperation treaty. We've seen visits to Jeddah by the Japanese Prime Minister, the Turkish President as well. And we've also seen a GCC and Central Asia summit take place. Frankly speaking, how do you explain what seems to be this diplomatic marathon?
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie, for having me. And thanks to Arab News as well. I think Saudi Arabia, as you have mentioned, right now is having this kind of beautiful marathon. And I would love to call it the Saudi Asian moment right now. And Saudi Arabia, a couple of days ago, signed a cooperation treaty with ASEAN. And as we know, ASEAN has 10 members in Southeast Asia. The most prominent among them are Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, and Singapore, and others. And there are more than 50 countries outside the region of the Southeast Asia having cooperation treaties with this important and vital group. This definitely will enhance the bilateral relations of the kingdom with all the ASEAN members. So that's why I call it's the Saudi Asian moment. And with regards also to the Japan visit, to the Japanese Prime Minister visit to Saudi Arabia, it was a very important visit. There were more than 26 agreements that have been signed between Japan and Saudi Arabia that involve so many different fields. And you can name like energy, water, advanced industries, technologies, and health sector, and also the financial sector. So there is a lot going on with regards to the Saudi Asian relations. And we should not forget also the fact that Central Asian GCC meeting happened just a couple of days ago, where for the first time, the two blocs started to solidify their relationships. We are speaking of the Central Asian countries that have never been in the Saudi radar like they are now. These 5 countries are among the countries that are considered to be very important also in Opaque Plus, specifically Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. And there are massive solar energy and electricity projects run by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, specifically through Aqua Power Company, especially in Uzbekistan. And I think this summit of the 5 Central Asian countries and the 6 GCC countries will pave the way for more win-win cooperation, and will definitely solidify the strategic and economic interest of both blocs. It's the Saudi Asian moment.
And we're certainly seeing a changing relationship between a lot of these Asian companies and Saudi Arabia as well. You mentioned the trade there between Saudi and Japan. That was up 40% compared to a year ago. And we talked a little bit about the GCC Central Asia Summit there as well. And some interesting comments from the Crown Prince in his opening. He welcomed the countries back to their second home. And we've also seen China play a major role in the Chinese brokered deal with Iran that Saudi Arabia signed back in March. But frankly, we haven't seen a lot being accomplished from this deal as a result, apart from the reopening of the Iranian embassy in Riyadh. In fact, Saudi Arabia hasn't even appointed an ambassador yet to Tehran. Why do you think we haven't seen more progress?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, since the show is called Frankly Speaking, I would say, frankly speaking, a couple of years ago, 8 or 7 years ago, I remember like I had a friend of mine. He is a diplomat, a GCC diplomat in Beijing, in China. And I actually asked him, like, why we are not pushing the Chinese to do something with regards to Iran. And he told me that they always raise up this question to the Chinese counterparts, and they always speak about nothing but trade. So it is a very important moment right now when we have the Chinese government to shift their focus, not only from trade perspective, but also to look at security arrangements and also political brokerage, etc. So I think it's a big move for China. It's a big move for Iran. It's a big move for the GCC countries and Saudi Arabia for sure. With regards to the future, definitely China is considered to be the biggest trading partner of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the biggest trading partner for China in the Middle East and North Africa. So these two countries have strong relations with regards to energy, with regards to products of all sorts, etc. So, and China, we know it's the factory of the world. So with regards to going back to Iran, Iran has definitely been a problematic regional power for so long. Will it be contained by this brokerage? Time will tell us. We can't actually anticipate how the Iranians will be taking this mediation forward, because at the end of the day, we need to see actions. Actions speak louder than words. But if you ask me about my own kind of opinion, I would say I am actually optimistic. I'm optimistic because at least China, we know that China is the only breathing mechanism for the Iranian regime. So once you have China to be in the middle in this mediation kind of process, that means somehow you can call China as the guarantor of this deal between Tehran and Riyadh. Will there be embassies? Yes. I think things are just taking some time, and the Saudis are actually working on the logistic kind of aspect of it. I don't have enough information about why isn't it been accomplished, etc. But I think it's just gonna take a little bit of time. But overall, the Saudi-Iranian relations needs to be a good relations for the betterment of the whole region, because at the end of the day, you need to have a development model. Iran is considered to be one of the poorest countries right now when it comes to the poverty line. 45% of the people are under the poverty line. Why is that? They supposed to be actually among the G20 nations, and they can actually become a very prosperous nation if they just let go with their revolutionary kind of
well, you say that, but we're just not seeing that progress. And you said, the importance of China in this deal as well, but we haven't seen any progress. Iran really hasn't demonstrated it could push the Houthis towards peace in Yemen. The situation in Hezbollah-controlled Lebanon is still dire, and its status quo in Iraq, which has effectively become an extension of the Iranian regime. The Prime Minister there, al-Sudani, is merely a puppet for Iran. Why aren't we seeing this change?
Yeah, you're actually right. That's true that we haven't seen much, but we should not forget the fact that such arrangements and such brokerage and such mediation takes time. So there's no a silver bullet for all the issues here in the Middle East. Will we be in complete trust with the Iranian promises? I would say no, and we don't have to take what they say at face value, but will we be able to put China in the middle and to pressure the Iranian regime to change course? I would say yes, absolutely yes. So it will take time, and hopefully we will see some outcomes that are positive for the region.
Well, let's hope it doesn't take too much time when so many lives are at stake. I want to talk a little bit more widely throughout the region, specifically about Syria. Now, it has been readmitted to the Arab League, which also happened in Jeddah just a few weeks ago. But we've seen no signs of the Assad regime abandoning its previous policies, which had led to its isolation in the first place. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I really can't see a stick, just a carrot for the regime.
Yeah, I think Syria definitely remains to be a big concern for the region, not only for Saudi Arabia, but for the region and the wider world as well. Readmitting the Syrian regime and Syria to the Arab fold won't bring immediate outcomes, just as I said with regards to the Iranians. And such things take time. The smuggling of Syrian Captagon is unfortunately still ongoing. The Saudis actually just today, they announced that they foiled a smuggling attempt with the help and cooperation with Oman, with Muscat. And it's very unfortunate that the Syrians are still smuggling these weapons and just wreaking havoc in the region through this drug and pandemic, I would call it. Anyway, let's also remember that the Syrian foreign minister, a couple of days before the Arab summit, he promised earlier that they will take more steps to curb the influx of drugs, but that is yet to be seen. What will be happening, what we will be noticing, what we will be seeing in the near future, I don't have an answer for this, but at the same time, I know that engagement is better than no engagement. So that's the kind of thing I can actually say at the moment. So we would love to engage with the Syrian regime in such a way that can actually help to put our priorities in a way that can actually make the relationship better in the future. Will that happen very soon? I don't know.
Well, I interviewed leading US expert Caroline Rose about Captagon here on our program to mark the International Anti-Drug Trafficking Day. Now, she said that the measures taken by Syria so far have been purely cosmetic, and in fact, the real game changer would be standing up to senior level enablers within the regime itself, many of whom are close relatives or friends of President Assad himself. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's actually true that the Syrian regime, and specifically Maher al-Assad, who is the brother of Bashar, he is actually the man behind all this drug smuggling. And it is very unfortunate what's going on. And actually, it is the biggest drug cartel in the world right now. So the Middle East is not only about conflicts and terrorism here and there, but also drug cartel that is considered to be 3 times bigger than the ones in Latin America, as per a British report that has been published last year. So it is very concerning. What can we do? I think there are 2 ways we can actually work on this issue. One, through engagement. Will that work alone? I don't think so. But the second point, which is important, is to be somehow in the middle with regards to the Syrian issue. Why? Because the Saudis have been in support of the 2254 United Nations Accord that speaks about the reforms that needs to be taken so for the sanctions to be lifted, to have like a political reform of some sort in Syria, to have the immigrants or the refugees to be back to their country, and also to curb on the and to confront the drug cartel within Syria. And also another point, which is very important, is to kick out the Iranian-backed militias and the foreign militias. Will these things happen overnight? I don't think so. Will these things, or can these things happen gradually, slowly but gradually? It could happen. So I think the Saudis with the Arabs will have a unified kind of position where they can actually put enough pressure on Damascus to change course.
And I think while the regime profits so much out of the Captagon drug trade, I think that's going to be very difficult to manage, but time will tell in the coming months. I want to get your thoughts on another controversial topic, Opaque Plus and its relationship with Russia. Now, you founded and used to manage SAPRAC, which was effectively a Saudi lobby based out of Washington, D.C. So you, out of everyone, probably know more than most why Americans are uncomfortable with the close ties that we're seeing between Riyadh and Moscow. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think, okay, here's the thing. The Saudis have always been having this idea that sovereignty is key to Saudi Arabia and to all the countries that are considered to be friends with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis have not changed course with regards to jumping from an ally to another. That's not the practices and the style of the kingdom. The Saudis have been following their interest since their inception. So in the very beginning, the Saudis have been working with the Americans to confront the major conflicts and the major adversaries in the world. So that's why I said it earlier, that the Saudis and the Americans fought communism together. They fought communism together, and they fought terrorism together, and they stabilized the global energy and economy together. So, and the Saudis are actually really committed to this very strategic and important relationship. With regards to the US, right now, it is considered to be the second trading partner for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It is considered to be the major strategic partner of the kingdom when it comes to security, etc. But absolutely, there are some differences, just like in any other relation. Right now, maybe the Americans are kind of upset that we are actually working with the Russians through Opaque Plus, but I don't think they should be actually having any concern with that regard, because we're not there to help a specific country against another. We are there to stabilize the energy market, and the one and only way to do so is through engagement and through having a unified kind of mechanism through which we can actually work on the demand and supply. Because at the end of the day, we should be actually applauded as Saudi Arabia and OPEC Plus for the effort that they have done. Because before the crisis and before the invasion of Ukraine, everyone, not everyone, but like almost every analyst and energy analyst was speaking about like having the energy prices and the barrel of oil to go to 140 US dollars. And look at it right now. So it didn't even touch a price that is close to that. So I think the OPEC Plus and Saudi as the capital of energy and the central bank of energy in the world has been doing a great job by getting all the OPEC Plus members to agree on stabilizing the energy market. So that's a good thing, and it works for the good of every country, including the United States.
Okay, so speaking of Russia, let's talk about Ukraine as well, the scenario there. Now, we have hosted President Zelensky here on Frankly Speaking. Now, he actually thanked Saudi Arabia for its efforts in mediating with Russia to help with the prisoner release last year. Of course, in February this year, we also saw Saudi agree to give $400 million worth of humanitarian aid to Ukraine as well. So how do you explain the American position, which seems to think Saudi is siding with Moscow, when we have the actual Ukrainian president thanking the kingdom?
Yeah, I think the best who can answer the Americans with that regard is the president of Ukraine. So, and I think it's only like a media kind of thing. It's not a firm kind of a position by the US government, because all what they want to do is just to have you to be siding with them completely in the way they see things. The Saudis, just like most of the global South countries, India and other nations, have all asked for peace, have all asked for de-escalation. We don't want to have these gloves to be off completely and everyone would fight everyone until the end, because that's not going to be good for the future of humanity.
But it's not just the media who has criticized Saudi. We have seen criticism from the US government.
That's true, but not like as much as the media, because the US government has been speaking about this when they spoke about the energy cut, or the barrels of oils cut that Saudi Arabia has enacted through OPEC Plus, and they said that's going to be for the benefits of Russia. And then later on, we saw actually some Democratic congressmen who spoke about, actually, the Saudis were right. Why did he say that? Because he saw the benefits of stabilizing the energy market. They thought in the very beginning, the US administration, that we want the prices of oil to rocket, etc. But that didn't happen, because we knew that what we wanted is to stabilize the energy market, because very high prices are not actually going to be for the interests of Saudi Arabia, because the products that we will be receiving and importing will be of higher prices. So people need to understand these ABC kind of mechanism with regards to recession, inflation, and also the energy market prices. So overall, I don't think anyone buys the idea of Saudi Arabia siding with Russia through its decisions in OPEC. It's just like an outdated kind of information that has been thrown by the US administration at a time of anger, and then the media kept talking about it up to now.
And I think it's important to note that Saudi Arabia already began the voluntary production cuts from OPEC Plus at the start of this month. Now, we know Russia is going to reduce its production next month. We don't know by how much, but it does feel like Saudi is already bearing the brunt of these production cuts. In fact, no matter what the kingdom does, it always seems to be criticised or questioned. If you bring in superstar footballers like Cristiano Ronaldo or try and stage the Formula One, you are accused of sports washing. If you introduce environmental initiatives, you're accused of greenwashing. In fact, I even read recently about a criticism of gastro washing, but I don't think any of us really know what that is. So are these kinds of accusations, are they taken seriously inside the kingdom?
Yeah, not at all, Katie. And there's actually something else that is called chef washing, because Saudi Arabia was bringing some chefs from the outside, from abroad, to Saudi Arabia. So right now they are saying Saudi Arabia is trying to use the kitchen to change the perception of people. So it's just like, I don't think anyone takes them seriously anymore in Saudi Arabia. And let's not forget the fact that the Saudi Vision 2030, it spoke about empowering the youth in Saudi Arabia, because more than 65% of the Saudi population are under the age of 35. So, and helping the Saudi youth and the Saudi society can happen through different sectors, including entertainment, including sports, etc. So what's wrong with that? Like, what's wrong with that, with that aspect? So they also may raise the question of the Gulf, because right now maybe Saudi Arabia will be somehow considered to be the hub of Gulf. What's wrong if Saudi Arabia, that's the question, what's wrong if Saudi Arabia is going to transform this sport from an exclusive elite game to all people's game? It's going to be for ordinary people. It's going to be an international game that everyone can participate in. And when it comes to bringing players, as you said, from Europe, like, why there is this outcry here? I don't remember any Arab or African countries blaming the European League to take our players. Like, I didn't hear Egypt to be complaining to the European League when they took Mohamed Salah, Mo Salah. So just let's celebrate soccer, let's celebrate football, and leave racism and Eurocentrism aside, because these actions and statements show nothing but an inferior complexity from the side of some Westerners, unfortunately.
Well, this has caused quite the stir amongst the Saudi critics in the US. Congress, they're now investigating. Human rights activists are calling for boycotts. And former US diplomat Jason Greenblatt, he wrote a column in Arab News saying that Congress should support investment from America, not discourage it. He also called out activists for being hypocritical. America has human rights violations itself. It also does more than $690 billion worth of trade with China. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think you said it right. It's merely a hypocrisy. It's very sad seeing like an American, like the American friends, and I consider the United States to be one of the most important strategic partners of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to be somehow going to this road of a zero-sum kind of game, and by somehow weaponizing human rights in a very nasty way, I would call it. And just imagine if Saudi Arabia would play the same game. We can actually say the same things with regards to the prisons in the US. You know that the most populated prisons in the world are in the United States, but we're not using that. We are not there to politicize human rights. And when it comes to human rights in the United States, like everyone can know, just go and walk down the streets of LA and see that number of homeless people there in San Francisco, in Washington, D.C., everywhere. That needs to be dealt with. But we are not there to politicize that. We want to help our friends, to tell them from time to time that these things need to be corrected. Yes, even though I'm actually sure that we don't like even to involve ourselves when it comes to officials in the domestic affairs of other countries. But I think the United States needs to get over this idea of claiming the high moral stance, because that's not going to help them. It's not going to help their causes. It's not going to help them even fixing and rectifying the trajectory of the issues they have domestically. Because if they spend 10% of the efforts they do internationally when it comes to human rights, they will fix the problems they have domestically. So that's what we would love to see the United States, because the United States is the beacon of hope. And I still see it as the beacon of hope, but it cannot remain to be the beacon of hope if they are blaming others for things that they are actually doing.
Okay, so you say the US needs to shift its priority for its own domestic policies and really focus on its own backyard. Are these kinds of reactions from America the reason why Saudi is now doing more business with the likes of China, Japan, and France? Do you think it is that these countries are more pragmatic, or are they simply less politicized?
Yeah, everything has been politicized recently. Like I just said it, and I can actually repeat it. And I'd say, okay, what about the United States? I'm going to use whataboutism. I know it's a logical fallacy, but I'm going to use it. The United States is the biggest trading partner with China. We should not be in a way where we dictate on how other nations should conduct their businesses and with whom they should conduct their businesses. 30 years ago, China used to be the biggest trading partner for 20 countries. Right now, more than 130 countries. So it's a reality on the ground. It's the factory of the world. Let's work with China. China is not, as it is perceived, to be like an evil kind of a country. We don't want that kind of double standards and also this kind of zero-sum kind of approach by the United States. We want the world to live in harmony. And at the same time, we want to have a win-win agreement with everyone, whether it's with China, whether it's with Russia, whether it's with our European friends, with the United States. And that's the role that Saudi Arabia wants to play, to be an equalizer, to be right in the middle, and to make business with everyone.
Well, that would be wonderful, but that does really feel like an ideal world, which we seem to be very far removed of at the moment, particularly when we consider incidents that recently took place. The horrific incident we saw several weeks ago in Stockholm when a man burnt a Quran outside a major mosque. Huge outcry from that. Just a few days ago, we saw the same man stomp on and kick a Quran as well. How are these repeated incidents being perceived in the kingdom?
Burning the copy of any holy book, whether it's the Holy Quran, the Bible, the Torah, or any sacred book, is absolutely disgusting and unjustifiable. And it's an action of extreme hate. If this is not hate, then what constitutes hate? This is my question. And I suppose if the Swedish government and its legal system doesn't rectify their laws with regards to allowing extremists and radicals to spread hate, then I won't be surprised if there will be a unanimous decision to take measures by the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference.
And I think that's an important point. I know it's something you have also tweeted about previously, that it's not just about burning the Quran, but also about burning or insulting all religious books and symbols of all faiths. And I think that's a position most rational people would agree with. So what do you say to the freedom of speech activists who believe it is within their absolute right to do so? Is this free speech or hate speech?
Yeah, thank you, Katie. It's a good question, because they are arguing that that's action of burning the Quran or burning any holy book is part of freedom of expression. So what about the Nazi slogans? That's the question. Because 2 years ago, if you go and check Reuters' report, they talked about the Swedish government and the Swedish police arresting someone for only saying a Nazi slogan. And that's what he deserved. He deserves to be arrested for that, that's for sure, and to be sued. But why does it only happen when it comes to Nazi slogans and not with regards to preaching hate against 1.7 billion people, whether Muslims or the Christians or the Jews or any group? So all what we want is to have a reasonable review from the Swedish government. It's going to be for their sake, because at the end of the day, you don't want to jeopardize the relationship you have with 57 Muslim nations for appeasing only a bunch of radicals and extremists who want to spread hate. And do not play with the words of, oh, it's freedom of expression, freedom of press, freedom of whatever. No, it has nothing to do with freedom. Like burning a sacred book for millions and billions of people shows what? Shows that there is a specific, or there is this kind of big hatred that wants to be projected and to be protected also by the authorities. So that's in itself, I think, I've been to Sweden, I've been to Stockholm. It's a very friendly city, very friendly nation. The people there are considered to be, like, really seriously among the kindest. And I'm really surprised seeing their government and their legal system to allow such hatred.
Now, Swedish police have filed preliminary hate crime charges, so we will continue to watch that ongoing case. But continuing with the subject of freedom of expression, I know in previous interviews you've said the far-left wokeism trend is actually the opposite of freedom of expression, and in fact that it actually reinforces the negative stereotypes. So can you elaborate on this for us a little bit?
Yeah, I don't normally like to get myself involved in talking about the domestic affairs of other countries, but I mentioned what I've mentioned because I saw how dangerous this woke ideology to the whole world, not only to the United States or to the Western nations, but to the whole world. Why? Because you can tell that they are actually doing exactly the opposite of what they claim doing. What do I mean by that? They are saying that they want to help the minorities, but what they are doing is, through the reverse racism, is something very alarming. Why? Because they want to make people to be identified by the color of their skin. That is not something humanity should pursue anymore. And I think if Martin Luther King would come back to life right now, he would definitely be against the woke ideology, because he only said, and he wanted only one thing: to not be defined by the color of someone's skin, but by the character. So that's an aspect of it. The other aspect is the family issue and how the woke ideology is going against the family concept. That is very alarming. The way they do the indoctrination of the children is very alarming. These things are not going to be taken easily by the whole world's communities. And you know what happens in the United States doesn't stay in the United States. So the United States is considered to be the most influential country culturally, economically, politically, militarily, etc. So I would love to see the United States to somehow step back and to forget about the social engineering and to take their steps very carefully, because what they are going through is really, I would say, signs of the demise of an empire.
Well, very sage advice indeed. Mr. Al-Ansari, thank you so much for joining us this evening on Frankly Speaking. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Katie. Good to be with you.